Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
It has been a wild week. Here in this mid-April, we've had so much happen with the charity drive going on for charity water and for responsible charity, and it's been amazing so far. We're going to talk a bit more about it, but just an update. I know these numbers go wildly out of date as this show goes on YouTube, but our goal, $30,000, a very ambitious goal. When I put it up, I was thinking, 30,000. 30,000. Doing the math in my head and thinking how many people will participate and what's the response going to be, and I've never done anything like this before. And we are at this very moment, on Charity Water, we are, $401 short of our $15,000 goal. And that is the most amazing feeling, to be just a hair's breadth away from getting there. $15,000, which I believe is 3 different water projects built. Whether they're wells or whatever, they're clean water projects that are built in villages in developing countries, because water is such a huge issue. It's unsanitary water means disease, and it affects the food supply, and it's just this huge, and it's a tangible difference that is made. They don't just throw money at it, And so to see us come toward the finish line is so gratifying. We're about halfway there on our goal toward responsible charity. And that goal as well is $15,000. So, for what essentially has been about 10 days' work, we're up to a little over $23,000. That's amazing. Thank you so much to everybody. It feels good to be a part of something like this. I've had a few naysayers. You can't help anybody. You got to throw the whole system out. You got to start over. Or all charities are bogus. Or, there'll be some philosophical argument behind it, and maybe they have merit. I don't know. All I know is I'm just one guy who wanted to try to put something together that was more than just about bitching about religion, which is sometimes what we're all guilty of. I look on the Facebook page. Sometimes Natalie will kind of keep me in check. She'll go, "Have you seen your page lately?" So I log on, I'm looking at my page, and it's, religion sucks, religion stupid, screw religion, religion this, religion that, and that, all right, fine. And I take some time and mock religion myself. But is that all we got? Is that all I'm worth? Is that all I'm about? No, that's not what I want to be about, just about saying, screw religion. How about being positive? And so lately I've really tried to go in and make a focus of spreading pro-science information and giving out some great links about different inroads being made in science and posting the refutations to religious arguments, but they are constructive, informative refutations, and having some fun. And this was part of that. Geez, if all I can do is sit in the corner and bitch and moan, I am worthless. I want to do something. So, anyway, I'll talk a little bit more about where I don't mean to go off on that bunny trail here. It's funny. When I was in Christian radio, I started in 1990, and I did Christian radio in Tulsa through, I think we made it to 2002. The station I was at changed format, and I stayed. We became a pop format. But it was the mid-'90s. I think it was about 1995. And I was a spokesperson on the radio for an organization called Compassion International. And it was the typical child sponsorship thing. I guess it was a lot like World Vision. They didn't like to be compared to World Vision, but they would go into faraway countries and they would provide food and basic necessities, and they would give clothing and toys, and they would do all these things, help to get them into school. They were providing tangible benefit. And so on the air, we would do these drives to try to get child sponsors. And I don't remember what the monthly amount was for the sponsorship. It wasn't much. You know what those dollar figures are. In the grand scheme of things here in America, it's nothing. It's the cost of a dinner and a movie easy. And so we would do all of these. And on 2 different occasions in the 90s, I was given the opportunity to travel out of the country to see firsthand the work they were doing. It was part of a big thing that they were doing where they took broadcasters who were their representatives from around the country, and they put them on a plane, and we all went down to, the first trip was to Guatemala, the second trip was to Bolivia. And I live in a country where we get pissed off and feel put out if the battery goes dead in our garage door opener. We go to a fast food restaurant and the food's cold, or we didn't get the right flavor soft drink. You throw a hissy fit. If we're watching television and the show that comes on is not the show that we saw on the guide. In the grand scheme of things, I'm reminded of how good we have it. And I see a lot, especially with an international audience, I see a lot of people who throw stones at the United States. But I'll be honest, I honestly and continue to believe today that it is one of the greatest places to live on the planet. We have a lot of problems, but most nations do. And if you look at the freedoms we have, and if you look at the luxuries we have, compared to most of the other places on the planet. Even Christopher Hitchens realized this. He brought his citizenship here. And so I travel from the United States. I'm down in Guatemala. I'm looking at how these people live. And I'm just stunned. And they're precious people. And one of the most powerful experiences, for lack of a better way of saying it, was they packed us in a van and they took us all out to the city dump. We're like, what? We're going where? Yeah, we're going to the dump. So we ask, of course, the next question, why are we going to the dump? And they say there's a whole culture of people who live here. This is where some live in villages or whatnot. There's a culture of outcasts, and they live in the dump. They live in the dump? Yeah, they live in the dump. And so they drive us up there, and we're, it's weird. We're being told, be careful what and who you touch. I'm looking at somebody in the chat room talking about why Hitchens went to America. Read his autobiography, for God's sake. Anyway, we went down there, and all these people, they're covered in grime. And the dump trucks came out, and they backed in, and they would lift up the truck beds, and all this stuff, this gunk, this refuse, this waste would pour out into these big piles. And I shit you not, these people converged on this pile of just junk, picking through it to find whatever leftovers, whatever. I'd never seen anything like it in my whole life. And I became convinced that it is important, it is imperative for those of us who can to do something for those who can't. Now, when I was down there, we always said, your child sponsorship gives food, clothing, and education, and the gospel of Jesus Christ. And this was part of our pitch. The gospel was sold, like it was part of the benefit. And it was the last one, the most important one. Do you know the parable the story of, or not the parable, but the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, right? In the Bible, he feeds the masses physically before he feeds them spiritually. And this is a concept that the church has embraced. You go into a place, a faraway land, whatever, and you meet their physical need, whatever it is. They need structures, they need buildings, they need clean water, they need medicines, they need doctors to come in and try to work on people who are sick, to treat disease. Find the physical problem and you fix it. And once the physical need is met, then you tell them why you're there. You know, we're here because Jesus doesn't just want to heal your body. Jesus wants to heal your heart. Jesus wants to heal your soul. And when I was doing this, I was pitching this, and in our trips to Guatemala and Bolivia, I honestly was convinced we're giving him the complete package, man. We're not just giving him food and medicine and education. we're giving them the ticket to heaven. We're saving them that in every possible way they can be saved. Well, now, as a non-believer, I look back on those experiences. And I think about them. It's like you're looking through the looking glass the other way. And I had someone on my Facebook page. Her name is Lori Ann. She's a believer, and she occasionally will come to Jesus' defense on our Facebook page, and whatever, that's fine. She's been respectful. I mean, a lot of theists who stop by, do a drive-by, they make an insult and split or get blocked. Lori Ann has been, she's been nothing but civil and kind. And she asked the question honestly, Seth, do you honestly believe that Christians go and do good deeds because they are doing it only because they want eternal reward, or do you think they're doing it out of the kindness of their heart? Now, I look back at my time with compassion and looking at those types of endeavors that I did. I wasn't really thinking about what God was going to give me when I was down there. I was doing it because it felt good to do it, because I had this desire to be a part of it, because they said, hey, Seth, would you like to make a difference in the world? And I said, you bet. I wasn't ticking up the bonus points in my little checkbox that God's going to remember this and God's going to see me do that and God, God, God. And one thing I see the atheist community quite often doing is we'll say, oh, the religious only help others because they think a divine Father is watching over them. Sometimes that's true, but I think the religious and non-religious alike, they do good deeds and commit moral acts because they want to. Because they're wired to benefit someone else. And yes, many, many, many in the religious community, religious families, religious individuals are kind, wonderful people who want to make life better for others. They do want to alleviate suffering. They do want to see disease wiped out. They do want to see war end. People so often, I'm so sick and tired of people speaking about those in opposition to them in bumper stickers. All the religious are haters, all the religious are this, all the religious are that. Well, I've been on the inside, and I've seen from the inside out what it is like. And the vast majority are good people who want to do good things. Now, they believe that the reason they want to do good things is because God placed that on their heart, right? The desire came from God. I don't think it's about brownie points. I think that innate goodness, right, that innate morality, they just essentially ascribe it to God, where you and I say, well, it has an evolutionary explanation. Our show tonight's about morality. It's about goodness inside and outside of the religious construct. And before I get into that, I want to talk about one of the good deeds that we are doing this month through responsible charity. And I have Tracy McPherson, who's involved, and also Hemley Gonzalez. And Hemley, I believe you are the founder. Is that right?
I am.
And Tracy McPherson, I know you're on the board, but you're also heavily involved with this organization. In what capacity? What do you do for responsible charity?
I'm a goodwill ambassador, so my role is simply as a volunteer to raise awareness, get people involved, and spread the word as to what responsible charity is doing.
And I think she's our biggest cheerleader.
Well, she's the reason I heard about you. I have been in my own life looking for ways to try to do some good. And of course, my first thought is so many of these charities are agenda-driven. They go in and meet physical needs, but what they really want to do is once they've fed you physically, then they want to present to you a gospel message or a religious message. They're looking to convert you.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I think what we're witnessing is the evolution of compassion, as I like to call it, and we are moving from an old model that used to be a monopoly-based religious organizations creating the platform for charitable organizations to exist. And now we've got a more secular world that's upcoming in different regions of the world and rejecting this idea of quid pro quo per se. And that's one of the reasons why maybe 10 years ago it was difficult to find a secular charity or a charity that didn't come with any strings attached.
You don't have to name any names or anything, but I'm curious to see what you've seen behind the scenes.
Well, I mean, listen, let's be frank here. If anyone knows the work that I've done over the last few years, they can pretty much track it down to my ongoing investigation of the Missionaries to Charity, which is the charity that Mother Teresa started. And that's one of the reasons why I started Responsible Charity, because on my first time in India almost 4 years ago, I had taken a backpacking trip. And I didn't come to India to look for God. I came to India to take a break from my old life, and I decided that I wanted to split the time into backpacking the country with no particular plans, and then the other part I was going to volunteer, and I chose the Missionaries to Charity at that time because it was a book that I had written. It was the authorized biography, and for Mother Teresa, and it was one of the many books that I was reading at the time when I was making my travel decisions, and it just seemed, the way it was presented, it seemed like it was primarily about the work. So I came to India and I worked for 2 months, and needless to say, I was horrified. And I did my time as I had agreed to do so. But at the end of it, I just couldn't stay quiet about everything I witnessed, which is pretty traumatic and disheartening.
Tracy, you come from a heavily religious background and you escaped, right?
Yes.
And now you are driven to do some good in the secular community. There is something that drew you to responsible charity.
About a year ago, I was running to the grocery store, looking on my iPhone at the news, and someone had posted something to a story about a young woman in India who was in a home who basically volunteers watched her die as the organization refused to step in and provide the basic medical care she needed to survive. And it was a really horrific story, and as you read it, you have this reaction that there has to be a better way. There's got to be something that can be done effectively to help people in this situation, be it through medical care, be it through education and how to not get sick in the first place. But from the moment I read that, I just knew from the way it hit me, I was going to become involved in some organization that did work to help people in these situations. And when I found out about responsible charity through a friend, I'm a skeptical person. I did my research. I looked at it very thoroughly. What I discovered in responsible charity was an organization that is more transparent, really, than any charity I've seen before. They post on their Facebook page all receipts for all transactions. Even if it's, they go to a street vendor to pick up clothing for one of the kids who needs clothes, they'll try to get a little handwritten receipt from the vendor. They post their incoming finances, their outgoing finances. And something that Hemley won't tell you, but that I will tell you, is that Hemley, as the founder and lead of the charity, takes not a cent from it. I mean, he came from a very successful career as a realtor in Miami, for having a great life, a house, everything, and gave that up and is essentially now itinerant. He lives with whoever can put him up. He takes whatever jobs he can get shortly while he's back in the States for fundraising purposes, and then uses that money that he makes to go back and help. So that's really rare. I mean, most charities do at least pay the people who run it a stipend, if nothing else. And so those are the things that made responsible charity stand out to me. Second to that would be the fact that they do provide birth control and they focus on education. those were things that were strongly lacking in my own fundamentalist background, and that I think are key to escaping poverty, both physical poverty and poverty of the mind.
What long-term solutions are we creating? Are you educating? Are you teaching skills, life skills? How are we preventing the next generation from having the same problems?
The central focus of the charity is education, a two-way street, if you will. Number one, we start with the children of the families who live in the slums. We're essentially working with what I call the untouchables of the caste system in India and the poorest of the poor. The school system publicly is completely messed up.
One thing I would add is that in terms of helping the parents, we can give them a better life. We can get them to a point where their children are not dying at 6 months to 1 year of age from waterborne illnesses. We can help them to get the basic needs they need to carry on their craft, whether it's a sewing machine so that they can do the work they need to do. But for the children is where the real hope lies, because these kids are still young, they're still malleable, and if they can get that education, they have then the tools that'll get them out of the slums.
Tracy, do you have a success story that comes to mind, something that you carry with you that when people ask you about it, you love to tell?
I do. My favorite story is the story of a little boy that came to Responsible Charity and had been burned terribly. He had suffered horrible burns to his head, his hands, would very well have died had he not been helped. Arrangements were made with connections with local doctors that he was able to get the surgeries he needed. But in order for him to even get those surgeries, he had to get good nutrition. He had to have clean water, because if he had washed in the water that was readily available, he would have died from the infections. And so it was a story of an amazing cooperation between Responsible Charity, between the people in the slums being willing and able to listen and learn and pick up on things that they would not have necessarily known before about wound care, about them being willing to trust a stranger with helping with their child, doctors willing to donate their time. And I'm talking not doctors from the United States who have come over to India to give a week of their time. No, I'm talking about doctors who are there, who are Indian, who are part of the culture. And this child was able to get the surgeries he needed and is now able to be a healthy child. And as he grows, as he's a little older, he'll be able to attend school.
He's an interesting case because pretty much all the families that we work with are Muslims. They're born into the religion that they practice, but even the practice is a little bit obscure because a lot of them can't read. I have yet to locate a Quran in most of the houses that we work in, but they have the sense of being Muslim, and they just repeat a lot of the stuff that they're told. And Arman, who's a little boy that Tracy is speaking about, is now about to be 3 years old. And he's from a village outside of Calcutta, and from a Muslim background. And it doesn't really matter. He came to us in a terrible condition, and we had the ability at that time to jump into action.
Well, I've been involved in charity in some capacity, but this is the first time I've ever done a charity drive with a secular focus. And honestly, it's exciting to be involved with you guys. So you're seeing a good outpouring, right? You guys have seen several $1,000s come in, and the response has been enthusiastic, yes?
Yes, we have about just over $7,700 so far and counting. It's very exciting to have this goal of $15,000 for this month.
Is some of the work that we're doing now and the contributions now, some of that's going toward the water filters, right?
Yes, there are water filters for the families that we are planning to use the first $3,000 for. These are water filters that are portable, that will filter water for one family for at least 5 years. And it seems like such a small thing to us here in the West to drink water and not get sick from it. But for these families, it's a matter of life and death. We can't put a well in for them. I mean, they're in a slum in the middle of the city. But what we can do is provide them with those filters so that they can filter the water and not be drinking liquid death, essentially.
Well, I lost Hemley. I don't have him to finish the call here, so let me just finish it with you. Very quickly, I want to encourage anybody and everybody, and I'll be shameless about it, freaking go to the website. Go to my Facebook page. You will see the links there. Go and do whatever you can, because you really will make a difference. You want to help me out here, Tracy? A final slug for responsible charity?
every dollar counts. I can thank you, Henley can thank you, but there's 200 other people, at least, in the slums of India who are going to thank you for this. Any amount that you can afford to donate, we greatly appreciate it.
Actually, if you want to make it simpler, just go to thethinkingatheist.com. I have both links on the homepage. We're talking about doing good deeds, being moral people. I get so sick and tired of the you can't be moral without God, which is not really an argument. I think it's more of a provocation. They play that card a lot like they play the Hitler card. It's not really a well thought out argument. It's not designed to defeat you intellectually, right? It's really more of an insult. You're not moral. It is a hot button. And it's said to provoke. It's not because I think it has a whole lot of meaning, you know. And so we're talking about whether or not it can exist. I got an email from Deb. Deb said, I recently shared your Good Without God charity drive on my Facebook wall. I was immediately met with a long commentary from a Christian regarding the, quote, fact that there is no good outside of the Judeo-Christian framework and that any morality that atheists have is borrowed Christianity. Man, I've heard that argument before. She says, I'm always blown away by this, and I was forced to respond. I explained that my 3-year-old daughter has never been given the threat of hell or other horrifying restraints, yet she is fundamentally kind. It hurts her to see other people or animals in pain, and she goes out of her way to help. Tribal humans survived and cooperated in groups long before the Judeo-Christian gods said they had to, and that the Bible has its own serious contradictions when it comes to morality. The foundational Old Testament laws that were supposedly written by the same God who wrote the New Testament are extremely brutal and would not be accepted as good in today's culture. I feel that the bigger concept of Christianity is flawed. The concept that there is a God who created the universe with natural, observable laws that can be documented but contradict his own teachings is absurd. Then that same God places humans with the ability to critically think and analyze on a planet with the threat that they must believe in one singular explanation or they will be tortured in hell for eternity. It's fundamentally what I would consider evil. I'm not sure how Christians can truly live in paradise, worshiping a God who is torturing so many, whose only flaw is to think on their own, a supposedly God-given gift. I'm guessing that very few Christians have allowed themselves to think through these concepts because they're not pleasant. It's easier to read beautiful verses regarding love, faith, and forgiveness and skip over the brutal concepts that are the real foundation for their beliefs. It's frustrating. Deb, thank you very much for the letter. Let's go to the phones here real fast and see if we can get some people who've been very patient on hold. 949. Hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hi, this is Austin.
Austin, what's going on? Do you have a comment or an opinion or perspective, a story, something for us here?
I became an atheist last January, and I was thinking to myself, how is this going to affect me as a person? You know, because I was raised a Christian, but I thank my mother. She didn't shove that down my throat as much as most of the people out there. Then I had a realization that no matter what, I'm still me. I'm a good person, no matter who I am or what I believe. And I just took God out of the equation, and I was still there. I was still a good person. So I feel morality should be what you think is right and wrong, what you find moral and immoral. And I think that's the difference that people need to know. I don't think any religions should be able to conflict with that.
You know, if someone sees that morality exists outside of their religious construct, it just means they're mildly observant. If you look at the people who are non-believers on this planet, if they were not moral, wouldn't they be roaming the streets, murdering and raping and robbing and, you know what I'm saying? I mean,
that's what I find most Christians think, is that if you don't have God to have your morality, you'll be a rapist murderer, which freaks me out a bit because how can someone think like that?
Well, I appreciate the call and your perspective, and thanks for your patience on hold.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, man. And keep doing what you're doing, man. It keeps me going every day.
Thank you. Thank you, Austin. Take care of yourself.
Thanks.
There's a video I posted today on my Facebook page that I encourage you to look up. I'm going to butcher his name, and I certainly don't want to, but there is no pronunciation of it in the actual YouTube video. I want to say it's Frans de Waal. It's F as in Frank, Fransde WAAL. And he has a video called Moral Behavior in Animals. Now, if you're like me, most people have said, well, the animal kingdom's just brutal on it. You can't say that morality exists. Morality is basically a human endeavor. Well, I know the animal kingdom can be very brutal. It's true, just like humankind. But it's fascinating. It's like a 20-minute speech that DeWalt gave at TED, where he talks about these studies they did with chimpanzees and elephants and talking about teamwork and compassion and empathy. And it is stunning. It's stunning. And you see echoes of behaviors that you and I as human beings display all the time. You know, positive emotion and empathy and compassion and community. You know, comforting the grieving, comforting someone who has had a lousy day. Freaking chimpanzees do that. And he actually shows. And so if you get a chance, it's Frans de Waal, Moral Behavior in Animals. And you can find it on YouTube and forward it to anybody who tells you that it's uniquely a human thing to be moral. I believe there's also several written articles out there. I saw one on, it was actually in the New York Times opinion pages. It was published October the 17th of 2010, and the title of the article by Frans de Waal is Morals Without God, and I'll post that link as well. Back to the phones very quickly. Let's talk to 718. Thanks for your patience. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hi, Seth. This is Bruno from New York City.
In my headset, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing. I think the listeners can hear just fine. So hit me, and if I don't answer right away, it's because I'm screaming at Blog Talk Radio. Go for it. What do you have for us today?
Well, last year there was a Brazilian show. The host was like starting to they talk about crimes that happen in the city, and they of course they show the most hideous crimes, of course, for the ratings. And then he was talking about a guy who killed a 2-year-old just for the fun of it. And he just went straight and said, this guy must be an atheist to do that kind of thing. And that's the TV show that is live. He started going on and saying, the reason that we have so much crime in this country is because of the atheists. And the reason that we have so many hideous things happening here is because of these people that don't have God in their hearts. They don't have limits. They don't feel love for anybody. They're the worst of our society. And then he just kept going on. And then at the end, he opened the phones for a poll. He wanted to see how many people that was watching the show believe in God or not. So at the end, the poll was like 50,000 believers and 2,000 atheists. Of course, he's being sued by the Atheist Association in Brazil, but I don't think that will go anywhere anyway. So.
My friend, I appreciate your call. I caught most of it. I think our listeners got all of it. But I'm glad that you're part of the show today. And take care of yourself, okay?
Thanks, man. Take care.
It's also funny. Have you noticed that morality seems to fit the personality, the model, the lifestyle, the personal preferences of whoever is talking about it? Here's a great example. When I was growing up, we had this little country church. It was on the perimeter of town. And I spent a couple of years there mostly because there's a girl there that I liked, and that's kind of what happens when you're a teenager. I didn't want to go to church growing up. Church was always a burden. You know, I don't want to go to church. I don't want to go to church. But then I had this girlfriend. Her name was Kelly. And Kelly was there every time the doors opened. Well, guess who had a perfect attendance record for church? I did. You know, it was different. Oh, come on, babe. You got to go to church. Kelly's going to be there. And I think I may have told this story. Forgive me. We had an evangelist come in, a revival preacher. He came in, usually once every year, once every 2 years. He's an ex-Marine. And he would talk about the evils of rock music. Evils of rock music. Oh, the devil. The devil is it's terrible. It's terrible. It's Satan. And, of course, at the time I was growing up with contemporary Christian music, which was the Christian alternative. And it was, Petra and Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith and all of these relatively benign. There was drums and guitars in him, though. So this guy's name is Bill Stern. He was, that Petra? Oh, that Petra? Oh, it's terrible. Oh, it's the devil. It's the devil disguising himself in sheep's clothing. And he went on and on about it. Well, guess what his favorite music was? Freaking country. Have you listened to the lyrics of country music? It's the same stuff that rock music's about. Getting laid. It's all it is, And then in country music, you love them and leave them. You know what I'm saying? You love them and leave them. And I thought, this is indicative of how people see morality. Well, those clothes aren't appropriate. Well, that's because you personally don't think it's appropriate. You're looking through your own lens. You have a hugely subjective point of view, and to help yourself feel better in your opinion and your position, what you do is you tell them that, well, God says that's evil. Now you're playing the God card. Now you've really got moral superiority. 518, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth, this is Andrew Gifford. I called in, I think it was 2 episodes ago, about never really believing. Figured I'd call back in because this was a perfect episode for me. If you remember from the last time I called in, I'm dating this evangelical Christian girl, pastor's kid, and she's told me a number of times that everybody borrows their morals from Christianity and the Bible. And when I was really analyzing what exactly I believed after she said that, I turned to Greg Epstein's Good Without God book. Not sure if you've heard of it. It's a great book. Kind of looks at that, and it looks at philosophy and where we find our morals. And apart from that, I was also taking a genetics class, and the genetics class, we looked at a documentary called Why Dogs Smile and Why Chimps Cry. And it's very similar to the thing you mentioned about the TED video, which it's funny that you mentioned it because I watched it literally 2 a.m. this morning. And it's fascinating. If anybody's out there, pull it up on YouTube, and it's, I think, 5 parts. And it looks at empathy in animals. They go through, like, wolves, chimps, a couple different apes, and even meerkats. The example I remembered was they had meerkats. One was injured, and they stayed with the meerkat, waited for it to succumb to its injuries. And it was really touching. And it showed that animals exhibit empathy, and I was it kind of debunked what she said about people borrowing their morals from the Bible.
I don't know about you, but I sincerely hope people don't borrow the morals of the Bible. When you read the Bible objectively and you look at the morals that are in there, if we had used this as our standard, our gold standard for good behavior, we'd be screwed. We'd be, it'd be infanticide, and we'd be beheading people and ramming spears through them, and we'd be genocide and incest, and it'd just be pandemonium out there. And of course, if you bring to light the fact that the so-called morality of the Bible is not really morality at all, well, they say, well, you're not reading it. What was that apologist we spoke to last week? His name was Cy ten Bruggencate, and he's the one who said that we all know God exists, right? Did you hear the guy?
God, it was aggravating. I was face-palming listening to it. I'm like, I can't believe this guy.
Here's what happened. We had a conversation, for those who missed it. It's called Proof That God Exists. It's the podcast before this one. It was just an impromptu extra show I did on a Friday night. This whole series of events happened, and I ended up with this guy on the phone. And I think we talked for 40 minutes. And he is a presuppositionalist, and he practices presuppositional apologetics, meaning that we all know that God exists, right? It's written on our hearts. Every person knows. There's not one person alive right now who does not know God exists. But we can't truly understand the Bible or know his ways because we do not believe. And, of course, he's the enlightened one, right? He's the one who happens to know, and he's giving us the benefit of his wisdom. Well, by the end of the conversation, I'm already getting emails, and the emails, apparently people were saying all the same thing. My head exploded, and I blame you. Why did you do this to us, the audience? Why did you expose us to this? Hey, man, I appreciate you listening and being a part of the show and the Thinking Atheist community. I hope you enjoyed being on the air today, and I appreciate it very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm still having a little bit of a difficult time hearing in my headphones. What happens is that you, as the audience, can hear fine, but for some reason through the host interface, it's digitally scrambled, and I catch about every fourth word. And so if I answer a question incorrectly, it's because I filled in the blanks incorrectly, and I'm sorry about that. It's just one of those weird things about internet radio. And I've emailed Blog Talk Radio, and I've said, look, is there anything you can do about this? First of all, can you help me with the fidelity of the audio? Because 8-bit 16K mono in the year 2012 is crazy. And they're like, yeah, we're working on it. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. All right, fine. Well, it's been almost a year and I haven't heard anything. So that's difficult. And the second thing is that half the time my callers just go by, and all I hear is this weird alien digital screaming in my headphones, and I'm trying my best to follow so that I can actually host the freaking show. So I appreciate your patience. And I'm not ungrateful. I mean, we live in a society, we live in a time, we live in an age where we can do a radio show without having to build an FM tower. You know, there was a time to do a show like this, the studio itself would cost you $75,000, and you'd have to have an FM or an AM stick somewhere, and you'd have to have an FCC license, and I mean, it would just be stupid expensive. That's why hardly anybody did it. I mean, it was usually either small businesses or major corporations would come in, like Clear Channel, and they would buy it, and then they would do it. But you and I never had the opportunity, and I am thankful that here in the year 2012 that we can have a conversation like this. I was checking the statistics on the podcast, and in the last 2 or 3 months, we are averaging in the neighborhood of 135,000 downloads a month just from Blog Talk Radio and iTunes. That does not count the YouTube audience, and they're from all over the world. And it's a tremendously exciting and humbling thing to see it happen. So I get frustrated, but I'm balancing it out. You know, what did I say at the beginning of the podcast? If this is the biggest of my problems, I've got a really good life. I got a lot of emails on the subject of morality without God. Scott said, I have heard this argument many times where religious people try to claim dominion over all morality, insisting that their God is the source of all morality. But there's a simple and fairly obvious question that seems to deflate this claim, as I've never received much of an answer to it from any religious person. I didn't come up with a question myself, but it was one of the important questions I forced myself to face a few years ago during my own journey out of religion, Scott says. Simply put, the question is this: is it undeniable that your Bible is loaded with moral contradictions? If you argue this point, you have simply not read your holy book without blinders on. If I can digress, Scott, it's going to be a challenge getting someone to admit out loud that the Bible is not moral, by the way, because they justify it. They equivocate and say, well, God can do whatever he wants. He is just. He plays by a different set of rules. Back to the letter. He said, if you argued this point, you've simply not read your holy book without blinders on, putting aside the obvious implications of God being at best a poor motivational writer and at worst an intentionally dishonest trickster. You must at least agree that to reap any moral guidance from it, one is forced to pick and choose from its passages. Therefore, one must already have some sense of morality outside of the Bible to guide these decisions. So how can your Bible be the ultimate source of moral guidance if we must rely upon another morality to help us decide which parts we agree with? That's a good point, Scott. I don't know that anyone looking through God glasses is going to take that first leap, but it's a good point. Josh says, good without a God? Let me guess. A theist is going to say no. An atheist is going to say yes. End of show. My thought on the subject is to make an effort to define the word good. I like to think something that is good has benefits that outweigh losses. But now it all comes down to his opinion about how beneficial belief in God is. If someone thinks belief in God is the most important thing ever, then any losses from that belief become irrelevant. I think that simple thought is at the center of the entire disagreement. How the hell are we going to get people to agree on what the benefits and losses of a belief in a God are? Anyone who can answer that question will be one of the greatest heroes in history, and ironically, that person may be worthy of worship. Good luck, Josh. David said, hey, I'm from Sweden. And a lot of the problems you talk about aren't really problems in my country, since our right to privacy when it comes to political and religious views are highly respected, and persecution of atheists are very few. If any, I can't recall any mentioning of it in media in Sweden. When it comes to politicians and other public figures, the only politician I know is religious is the head of the Christian Democrats. They're actually quite right-wing and very conservative. Just mentioning this to point out that the climate's very different in Sweden than in the USA. Evolution is accepted, and intelligent design isn't. And isn't taught in any public schools. Might be done in a private Christian school, but I'm not entirely sure. There are very few Christian Swedes I've talked to. To find the idea of us coexisting with dinosaurs on an 8,000-year-old planet laughable. When it comes to morality and goodness, we evolved as a herd animal, and we depend on each other for our survival. Therefore, it's not morality telling us not to hurt or kill each other. It's our self-preservation that tells us that killing within the herd is bad for the herd, and what's bad for the herd is bad for you. For many, many, many years, we were fairly stupid and didn't really think like we do today, since our collective intelligence has taken us very far from where we were in our birth. We nowadays actively think we might actually find killing wrong, which we actually don't. Our subconsciousness thinks it's counterproductive for the survival of oneself, the good of the herd. We are a herd. We are one as many and weak alone. Thank you, David, very much for the message. Let's go back to the switchboard. If I can find my switchboard interface, and with any luck, I'll be able to hear what you're saying. 630, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
This is Drew from Chicago. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Thanks for calling. What do you have for us?
Well, one of the very first pieces of atheist material I read when I was going through my transition actually came from a science blog. And one of the episodes was Religion as a Moral Center. And it made the argument that you didn't need religion to be moral. And one of the most compelling points in the podcast was that a person would never punch out an old woman and steal her purse. And how stupid would it be for a religious person to say, gee, I would love to punch out that old woman, but I can't because God told me not to. Well, I'm about to lose you, so I'm gonna.
Well, I appreciate you, and thanks for your patience on hold, and I hope you've enjoyed the show tonight, and you take care of yourself, okay?
Thank you.
Take care. 504, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Hi, what's your name?
Yes, this is Taylor from New Orleans. How are you?
Taylor, glad you're listening. What's going on?
I want to say this. I'm a virgin. I've got no religious reasons to be. I'm Buddhist. I've never been drunk. I've never smoked. I've never taken a drug not prescribed to me, nor have I ever stolen or cheated. I'm a member of the Navy, and I attempt greatly to exemplify integrity in both my words and my actions. That in itself ought to be a disproof of this idea that religion and morality are exclusive. In fact, I would argue the contrary, that religion can only be responsible for morality. I mean, doing the right thing for the wrong reason is, in my opinion, the wrong thing. If you're only being kind to others for the fear of going to hell or because you think it's what a higher being wants, you aren't really being genuine.
How old are you?
21. Sorry, 21. I just turned 21.
You've never smoked, you've never drank, you've never done anything like that.
Well, I drink very rarely. I have a glass of wine with dinner or a mimosa with breakfast.
Well, yeah, dude, I'm cool with that. I mean, I'm just saying, I was wondering if you've been freeze-dried or something, because it sounded to me like you haven't done this, you haven't done this, you haven't done what? And you're 20? That's amazing.
It never appealed to me. While I like to have a drink every now and then, like a wine, a mimosa, Johnny Walker, I drink maybe 4 or 5 times a year because who wants to be out of control? Why would I ever want that? Imagine if I were to, one drink will lead to another. You're drunk. You don't know how you'll react. Someone dies. Someone gets hurt. I'll never forgive myself for that. Smoking, drugs, what use do I have for some external thing like that? None. Sex, I'm waiting for someone that I love. someone that I can trust to be the mother of my children, and at a time when I'm no longer in the military, where I can be there for the woman I love and for my children.
You remind me a lot of many of the poster children that we had in the church, because you're almost too good to be true. You're like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you're really, you're Mr. Clean. And it's not that I don't believe you, but when I hear somebody who's, 20-year-old red-blooded male, and I think, wow, this he's not interested. He's not interested. It always reminds me of they would take the most clean cut, right? The most outwardly conservative, the most proper among us, and they would put us on stage. I was on stage when I was 15 for Youth for Christ. I was this clean-cut, corn-fed, Midwest American boy who loved Jesus, and he had good values, and he's going to go out there and be an example for other people.
It's ironic. I come from an all-Catholic family that really doesn't do any of the things, or has not raised me to do any of the things that I do. They were all for drinking and the rest of it. And if you're going to have sex, try and wait till marriage. But if you don't, oh well. In fact, secretly, I think it was encouraged by, my father and his brothers otherwise.
You and I have something in common. I drink probably, I'm with you, maybe 4 or 5 times a year. I just never got into it. And part of it was for the reason that you stated. I swear, I always thought, I need every brain cell I can keep my hands on, man. I had seen a lot of people who would be like, oh, what did I do last night? How did I get here? And that to me was not really appealing. I always thought, geez, my worst nightmare was that I would wake up naked at the zoo or something. And the second thing was I never really developed much of a taste for most drinks. But when I was growing up, if you had a beer in the fridge, you might as well just jump head first into hell. You got a beer in the fridge, you're going straight to hell. And now I look at those things with a broader scope. When I grew up, I looked at those things differently, and I thought most of those things were just an excuse for Christian or religious people of any stripe to just claim superiority. They look at somebody else, and if you see somebody who looks down on drinking, they're just as guilty of gossip. And if you look at somebody who's down on gossip, they're just as guilty as fornication. And if they look down on fornication, they've got some other vice. And I'll tell you one thing, if you ever see somebody on stage, especially a pulpit preacher who is preaching out against something, for example, homosexuality, watch that person's life very closely in the years following that sermon, because people have a tendency to preach against the very thing they personally struggle with. So if they preach out against alcohol, I would guess there's a very good percentage that they personally have a problem with alcohol. If they preach out against homosexuality, they may have tendencies or even a history in that area. And it's one of those things I've just seen time and time again. Do you have an opinion on it?
I see a lot of hypocrisy. In fact, I see it the most with the story of Abraham and Isaac. It's the story that I despise more than anything, I think, in religion. A man who was willing, a father who was willing to kill his own son because of a voice in his head. Were anything like this to happen today, and it does, we would charge him with insanity or murder and lock them up. But yet Christians look upon this with a remarkable admirability for him. Again, all that is immoral suddenly becomes good once God says so. This is having it both ways in the most exorbitant manner.
What do you do in the service, by the way?
I'm a corpsman, hospital corpsman.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the dedication and sacrifice you've made, and I admire you for your service, and I thank you very much for the call. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. May I make one point?
Please do.
I saw in the chat room people were talking about my being Buddhist. The way I describe it to people when they ask, what does that entail? I say it's no different to me than Einstein. Just a man who saw the world, said, this is what I'm going to do, and went around sharing his ideas. He's not a god. There's nothing spectacular or phenomenal, extra paranormal or anything about him. Just someone to kind of look up to. A philosophy of life would be the best way to describe it, not a religion. We may do a show on, because I hear this story a lot from some people within the atheist and agnostic community, and they embrace Buddhism. And it's a very polarizing subject, as I'm sure you've experienced, and I think we're going to address that in the months ahead. So if we do so, feel free to call back in and give us your perspective, okay? Absolutely. Thank you. All my best. Thank you. Where also I have been in contact, I kid you not, with some representatives from the Church of Satan, because we've got a few Satanists who are on the atheist website and say that atheism and Satanism are congruous, and you can be both. And so I've been
doing a little homework and doing some reading up, and I was going to do it this month, and I just, with the charity, did not have time. I felt like the drive to raise the $30,000 was more important, and for that reason, I did I had that focus, and so I've moved the subject of Satanism down probably July sometime. Don't hold me to that, but we're going to talk about that. And it should be a spirited conversation. I'm not going to go there right now. Let's save it for the show. Don't take that bunny trail. I had a letter in from Nick. He said, "This is a great topic I've been researching lately. One interesting point, the golden rule, which Christians love to claim as their own, has been part of pretty much every society in recorded history. Worded a little differently, but always the same idea. As Christopher Hitchens once said, human decency is not derived from religion. It precedes it." Dustin said, "When I heard you were doing a podcast on good without God, I jumped at the opportunity to write in. You see, the question, how can you have morals without God, has been thrown in my face many a time, and I never understood the question because the answer is so blatantly obvious. Morals are nothing more than you doing or not doing to other people what you would or would not want done to yourself. Do you want to be raped? No. Why would I rape another person? That makes it morally wrong to rape. Do you want to be murdered? Of course not. Why would it be okay to murder someone else? This makes murder morally wrong. Do you want to have your stuff stolen? Forget about it. Why would it be all right for me to take someone else's stuff? This makes stealing morally wrong. Let's flip the concept. What is morally right? If you or a loved one were sick, wouldn't you want to help? Wouldn't you want people to help you financially? Yes, this makes giving money to charity morally right. Do you want to be loved by your family and friends? Of course. This makes loving others morally right. It's pretty simple. Put yourself on the receiving end and ask yourself, do I want this to happen to me or the ones I love? Answer yes, call it morally right. Answer no, call it morally wrong. Morals, in my opinion, are nothing more than saying do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Is this in the Bible? Sure it is. Luke 6:31. Does it make it a biblical concept? Absolutely not. It is simply common sense written down in an ancient document. Sometimes the Bible is doing nothing more than plagiarizing common sense and calling it religion. What a beautiful line, Dustin. The Ten Commandments have always frustrated me. First of all, because they're so rudimentary, right? Don't lie, right? Don't covet your neighbor's wife. Don't murder, right? Don't steal. Brilliant stuff, by the way. It really took a divine, omnipotent being to come up with that shit. But the first four have nothing to do with how we treat each other. It's all about God and his vanity. Me, 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 right? Don't have any other idols. Keep my day. It's all about me. I mean, the first four have nothing to do with being good. It's all about his jealousy. Me, me, me. He's a me monster. And then you look at other earlier cultures and you see that they have many of the same laws that were in the Old Testament. And yet, time and again, you ask people, do you think the Ten Commandments are the greatest moral laws ever given? And they go, yes, yes, yes. Now the next thing you do, and this is always a kick, ask them to name the 10. Recent study that came out said that, at least here in the United States, most people, the majority of people, can't name even 5 of them. Oh, yeah, they're the most important laws ever written, but we can't see. What are those things? I can't. They always remember the one about don't covet your neighbor's wife. They're so important, I can remember almost half of them. Once again, what people believe and what they say they believe, two different things. 940, thanks for your patience on hold. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
This is Chad.
Chad, thanks for your patience. I know it's been 40 minutes on hold. What's going on?
I specifically had a call about your Impromptu Friday show, which I really enjoyed.
Now, let me set this up real fast. This is the show where we had the apologist on, Cy Tinbruggenkate, and we spoke for 40 minutes, And did you facepalm? Did your head pop off? Are you mad at me? Because I want to prepare myself.
No, I really liked it. And like you said, it gives such a crystal clear window into the thought process of a lot of Christians. And what got me, you had a caller that challenged him on his website, which I went and visited. And I call it the tricky Christian question, because it's this question on morality that sets up this most absurd of circumstances. Is it morally right to have fun raping and torturing a child? You know, in this attempt to illustrate that there are absolute morals. Is it absolutely wrong to do such a thing? And you know what? I'm going to actually go out on a limb and say, well, in the sense that there is a God in heaven who dictates that this is an awful thing to do, no, it's not absolutely morally wrong. And to me, I think that's the whole point of it. We don't have an absolute moral authority out there dictating that there's these atrocities that we need to collectively guard against. That's what makes us human, the fact that we can look at something like this and say, that's horrible. Of course we don't want to do that. Do we need laws against it? Absolutely we need laws against it.
The challenge, too, I think, is when someone says to you that they possess the knowledge, this weird, intangible, unprovable, highly subjective knowledge, and it exists within their mind and heart and spirit and soul. And you, the other side of the argument, you don't have it. So they claim victory before the argument even begins. Well, you can't really participate. You haven't accepted Christ. You can't see what I see. You can't know what I know. And yet I myself can simply say the words that I have found, I have discovered, and can now posit the standard for absolute morality, and you must now abide by it. It's a parlor trick, and it's really a cheat.
I almost felt like in the middle of the conversation that he was standing there and would throw a smoke bomb down in a puff of cloud, and then, of course, he'd dart out of the room, you know, to avoid actually having to involve himself in a real conversation about what was going on.
Well, I'd like to think we gave him plenty of opportunity to express it. You know, some people said, hey, Seth, you did a great job of allowing him to speak. It was civil. It was polite. And I want that. I mean, there's no reason he and I should be enemies. At the same time, other people said, why did you not attack? Why did you not destroy this man? Why did you allow him to continue on? What's the matter with you? And it's a very polarized response I've gotten back in. And DPR and I honestly thought, well, let the guy talk. Let's hear what he has to say. And I think the more he spoke, the more he helped us. I don't know if that's the case, but I felt like, just keep talking, Si. You're doing great, buddy. You're doing wonderful.
That is exactly what I thought. The more you let him talk, the more he illustrated. I mean, I could hear the subtle quivering in your voice as you would challenge him very politely and ask him these questions. I think especially when it got to the subject where he was essentially saying, oh, yeah, there's plenty of people predestined to hell, essentially. And, yeah, that's exactly what God wants, because he wouldn't be much of a God if he didn't send people to hell now, would he?
Sure, if he doesn't get a chance to show off his fancy ball of fire, he doesn't get a chance to torch some souls. What kind of a God is he? My favorite part was when those of you who you're going to go back and you're going to hear this, and you're literally going to have an imprint of your own hand in your face. But where I asked the question, do you believe the Bible is the perfect, inerrant, absolutely accurate Word of God? And he said, yes, right? It's absolutely the Word of God, and it's perfect. My next question is, who wrote the book of Revelation? And he's going, well, it's John. We think it's John. But to not really know, right? Even the experts, the apologists, don't know specifically who was John of Patmos, John the Elder, John the Baptist, John the Apostle, John whatever. And so without even knowing who wrote it, you can go down to freaking Barnes & Noble, you can buy the latest John Grisham book, right? You know exactly who wrote it, when it was published, who the publisher is, how much he got paid, when the copyright expires. You can find out everything. But they can find a book that was written by anonymous Bronze Age primitives, and they can tell you with a straight face that they just know it's 100% true. Doesn't matter if I can't prove the authors. I know in my heart it's true. And by the way, since you don't believe in Jesus, you can't compete with me in this argument. It's a parlor trick, and it drove me a little bit nuts. But Anyway, I'm glad you listened. Did you make it all the way through?
Absolutely, made it all the way through. I found it fascinating. I didn't want to turn him off. I just wanted to hear what he was going to say next.
Hey, man, thanks for listening to the show and for being a caller on it. Thanks. Very much appreciated. Let's see. I've got 772. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth. This is Jeff from Sebastian.
What's going on, Jeff?
Not much. I just been listening to your podcast for about 3 months, and I started, funny enough, I'm an Eagle Scout, so I'm not quite sure how I made it through that, but I never really believed back then, but I think it really, forget the expression, but pretty much welded the connection when I kind of started thinking to myself, hey, something just doesn't seem right. So pardon me for going off rambling a little bit, but I wanted to give you a perspective. I'm an 18-year-old senior in high school, and we just had this whole drug presentation today about why drugs are bad, overdose, yada, yada, that kind of stuff. But many of the kids that I saw that are so, quote-unquote, religious, moral, morally straight, they want to do that, they were laughing their heads off at these people that were up there, pouring their heart out, trying to give us a little insight into what's going on with drugs and why you should just stay away from it. I was, totally appalled at that. And it's not only that. I see this all the time. I mean, when I finally came out and just said, you know what, I don't buy it, I'm not going to drink the Kool-Aid, people are coming, oh, how can you be moral? Well, like some of your other listeners that called in before, I just go by the general rule, do unto others what you want done to you. That's how I've lived my life mostly, and a lot of people somehow think that's illogical, but I don't know where they get that.
I was raised in a private school, and we honestly, it was I loved it. Even now I have only fond memories. There were a few bad ones, like when they showed us, I don't know, the Thief in the Night film series. That's not a pleasant one. But overall, I mean, it wasn't crazy. We didn't have to wear uniforms, and it wasn't, there wasn't frothing at the mouth and speaking in tongues. It was very conservative. It was just kind of a safe place. It wasn't really all that much to talk about. It was a positive place. But there were many other private schools in the area, and dude, it's essentially you paid tuition to wear uniforms and do the same blow that everybody else was doing, right? Everybody else was getting laid and doing coke and getting wasted and doing all the stuff you did in public school, except they did it under the guise of, well, they're in a protected place. They're doing it. I don't know if the parents told themselves this stuff did not happen, but they're teenagers. They were doing it just as much as everybody else was doing it, whether they were in a public or private school or what. That stuff exists everywhere. And I think teens will be teens. In and outside of the religious community, you will find the good ones, and you'll find, the not so good ones. It's just the way it is. Anything else?
That's another point you brought up, because when I did go to Wednesday youth group when I was about 16, so you can imagine 2 or 3 years ago, I always got this impression, which is pretty obvious, you know what, you have to be this. It's either you're this or you're not this. I'm not entirely what you would call an atheist, but I'm not religious at all. So I may be agnostic. I don't know, because I'm a teenager. I'm still growing. I don't know what's going on. I'm still learning. So this whole idea that you have to be one thing or you have to be another, I really don't appreciate that, because why can't we find middle ground? Why can't we think? Like a perfect example, we had a pro-life movement, the whole red armband thing going on, support the babies. You know what? I'm pro-choice, but only for the fact that, hey, let them choose for themselves, do what you want, just leave me out of it. And then I get from one side pro-life that, oh, you're a baby killer, you're a murderer, you're morally incorrect. And then when I say, hey, I'm pro-choice, but I don't believe in the idea just kill a baby for birth control, that's common sense. So I get it from the pro-choice people. Oh, you really don't support a woman's rights, blah, blah, blah.
Well, I think what you have discovered is what I think many people need to discover, is that these issues are so often complicated and nuanced, and so are the people who embrace those beliefs. And rather than throw the insult grenade at each other all the time, because I know many, 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 many people who are against abortion, and they're not crazy. They don't hate women. They don't want to take away all the rights of women. They're not frothing at the mouth, and they're not all a bunch of hicks. They're people who honestly believe that they are acting to preserve life. men and women, the fathers and the mothers, and they are operating from a moral belief that we've got to protect those who cannot protect themselves. They're operating really from a good place if you look at it from that perspective. And but to simply say, they're all haters, they're all this, they're all that, you've essentially minimized and reduced what is a very complex situation down to just a grenade. You just threw it over the fence and laughed and ran off. And I think the issue, and especially issues like abortion, deserve a lot more attention and a lot more respect than that. I appreciate your call. Thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
There's an article by Sam Harris. Sam, I'm a big fan of Sam. Letter to a Christian Nation was one of the first books. It's probably one of the first 7 or 8 books I ever read as I was turning the corner, from belief to non-belief. A lot of Sam's stuff, as a philosopher or whatnot, is really thick. And it's not something you really read for pleasure. For me, it's almost like a textbook. You're just like, I feel like I'm wading through these very thick ideas. And for someone like me who just, I'm not I'm just a guy. I'm just a person. I'm just a civilian down here in the trough. And I would read some of it and I would just, it was a little bit thick and I'd have to go read it 3 or 4 times to really try to get where he was going. But he wrote a great article. It was at secularhumanism.org. It was called The Myth of Secular Moral Chaos. Now, I'm not going to read the whole article to you, but I'm going to read a significant portion because I felt like it was a good way to cap the show. And I encourage you to go to read. You can just Google search it, Sam Harris, The Myth of Secular Moral Chaos. And I encourage you to go seek this article out and read it in its entirety for yourself. But let me share part of it with you. These are Sam's words, not mine. He says, one cannot criticize religious dogmatism for long without encountering the following claim, advanced as though it were a self-evident fact of nature. There is no secular basis for morality. Raping and killing children can only really be wrong, the thinking goes, if there is a God who says it is. Otherwise, right and wrong would be mere matters of social construction, and any society would be at liberty to decide that raping and killing children is actually a wholesome form of family fun. In the absence of God, John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer, could be a better person than Albert Schweitzer, if only more people agreed with him. It is simply amazing how widespread this fear of secular moral chaos is, given how many misconceptions about morality and human nature are required to set it whirling in a person's brain. There's undoubtedly much to be said against this spurious linkage between faith and morality, but the following 3 points should suffice. Point 1. If a book like the Bible were the only reliable blueprint for human decency that we had, it would be impossible, both practically and logically, to criticize it in moral terms. But it is extraordinarily easy to criticize the morality one finds in the Bible, as most of it is simply odious and incompatible with a civil society. As a source of objective morality, the Bible is one of the worst books we have. It might be the very worst, in fact, if we also didn't happen to have the Quran. Point 2. If religion were necessary for morality, there should be some evidence that atheists are less moral than believers. People of faith regularly allege that atheism is responsible for some of the most appalling crimes of the 20th century. Are atheists really less moral than believers? While it is true that the regimes of Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot were irreligious to varying degrees, they were not especially rational. In fact, their public pronouncements were little more than litanies of delusion. Delusions about race, economics, national identity, the march of history, or the moral dangers of intellectualism. In many respects, religion was directly culpable even here. Consider the Holocaust. The anti-Semitism that built the Nazi crematoria brick by brick was a direct inheritance from medieval Christianity. For centuries, Christian Europeans had viewed the Jews as the worst species of heretics and attributed every societal ill to their continued presence among the faithful. According to the United Nations Human Development Report 2005, The most atheistic societies, countries like Norway, Iceland, Australia, Canada, Sweden, Switzerland, Belgium, Japan, the Netherlands, Denmark, and the United Kingdom are actually the healthiest, as indicated by measures of life expectancy, adult literacy, per capita income, educational attainment, gender equality, homicide rate, and infant mortality. Conversely, the 50 nations now ranked lowest by the UN in terms of human development are unwaveringly religious. Of course, correlational data of this sort do not resolve questions of causality. Belief in God may lead to societal dysfunction. Societal dysfunction may foster a belief in God. Each factor may enable the other, or both may spring from some deeper source of mischief. Leaving aside the issue of cause and effect, these facts prove that atheism is perfectly compatible with the basic aspirations of a civil society. They also prove conclusively that religious faith does nothing to ensure a society's health. And number 3, if religion really provided the only conceivable objective basis for morality, it should be impossible to posit a non-theistic objective basis for morality. But it's not impossible. It's rather easy. Clearly, we can think of objective sources of moral order that do not require the existence of a law-giving God. In The End of Faith, I argue that questions of morality are really questions about happiness and suffering. If there are objectively better and worse ways to live so as to maximize happiness in this world, these would be objective moral truths worth knowing. Whether we will ever be in a position to discover these truths and agree about them cannot be known in advance, and this is the case for all questions of scientific fact. But if there are psychophysical laws that underwrite human well-being, and why wouldn't there be, then these laws are potentially discoverable. Knowledge of these laws would provide an enduring basis for an objective morality. In the meantime, everything about human experience suggests that love is better than hate for the purposes of living happily in this world. This is an objective claim about the human mind, the dynamics of social relations, and the moral order of our world. While we do not have anything like a final scientific approach to maximizing human happiness, it seems safe to say that raping and killing children will not be one of its primary constituents. One of the greatest challenges facing civilization in the 21st century is for human beings to learn to speak about their deepest personal concerns about ethics, spiritual experience, and the inevitability of human suffering in ways that are not flagrantly irrational. Nothing stands in the way of this project more than the respect we accord religious faith. Incompatible religious doctrines have balkanized our world into separate moral communities, and these divisions have become a continuous source of human conflict. The idea that there's a necessary link between religious faith and morality is one of the principal myths keeping religion in good standing among otherwise reasonable men and women. And yet it is a myth that is easily dispelled. Sam Harris, The Myth of Secular Moral Chaos. If you have an opinion on the subject, I welcome an email, editor@thethinkingatheist.com. And join us in the coming weeks. We have lots to do here. The broadcast Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Central. Coming up, we will have that podcast on Satanism. We're going to talk to atheist youth. We're going to talk next week about homeschooling. Is it healthy or detrimental? Join us then. The Thinking Atheist radio podcast. See ya.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.